I need to see your security footage from last Tuesday, and I'll need records for any prescriptions filled between 2 and 6 p.m. that day.
I'm Maya Chen. I own this pharmacy. Can you tell me what this is about?
There's an ongoing investigation. That's all you need to know. Now, are you going to cooperate, or are we going to have a problem?
Detective Webb, I want to help with any legitimate investigation. Under federal law, I can't share that without a warrant or a court order.
Ma'am, I don't think you understand how this works. Refusing to cooperate with a police investigation is obstruction. And obstruction, that's a crime.
There's a moment right before everything changes when you can feel it coming. It's like standing on a bridge and hearing the wood creak beneath your feet. You don't know if it'll hold. You don't know what happens if it doesn't. But you absolutely know that the next step matters. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from. Tap like and hit subscribe, because here we don't just tell stories, we tell stories that stay with you. Let's dive right in. Maya Chen felt that moment the second the door opened. She looked up from her computer screen, her fingers still hovering over the keyboard where she'd been typing notes about Mrs. Patterson's blood pressure medication. The afternoon sun was slanting through the front windows of the pharmacy, catching dust particles in the air, making everything feel slower than it was. And there he was, Detective Marcus Webb, 6'2", 40-something, the kind of presence that fills a room without trying, badge clipped to his belt like a warning, eyes that had seen too much and decided the world owed him something because of it. Maya knew that look. She'd seen it before, in different faces, different contexts, different moments. It was the look of someone who expected compliance, who'd built a career on people saying yes before they'd even finished asking the question. He walked straight to the counter. No smile, no greeting, just business. I need to see your security footage from last Tuesday, he said. Not asked, said. And I'll need records for any prescriptions filled between 2 and 6 p.m. that day. Maya felt her heart rate pick up, not from fear, but from recognition. This was it. This was the moment she'd been preparing for without knowing she was preparing for it. Detective, she said, keeping her voice steady, professional. I'm Maya Chen. I own this pharmacy. Can you tell me what this is about? Webb's jaw tightened, just slightly. Just enough that she could see he wasn't used to questions. There's an ongoing investigation, he said. That's all you need to know. Now, are you going to cooperate, or are we going to have a problem? The pharmacy had gone quiet. Mrs. Kim, browsing the vitamin aisle, had stopped moving. James, her pharmacy tech, had paused mid-count on a prescription. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to be humming a different tune. Maya took a breath. Detective Webb, she said, I want to help with any legitimate investigation. But what you're asking for, patient prescription records, that's protected health information. Under federal law, I can't share that without a warrant or a court order. Something flickered across Webb's face. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance, or both. Ma'am, he said, leaning forward slightly, I don't think you understand how this works. I'm conducting an official police investigation. Refusing to cooperate with a police investigation is obstruction. And obstruction, that's a crime. There it was, the threat wrapped in civility. The implication that her rights were actually obstacles. The suggestion that following the law was somehow the same as breaking it. Maya had spent 9 years working in pharmacies before this one. 9 years watching people hand over things they didn't have to give. 9 years seeing patients trust her with their deepest vulnerabilities, their HIV medications, their mental health prescriptions, their addiction recovery treatments, their hormone therapies. She'd seen what happened when that trust got broken. And she'd decided 3 years ago when she bought this place that it wouldn't happen here. Not on her watch. Detective, she said, and her voice was calm, but it carried weight. I'm not obstructing anything. I'm following federal law. HIPAA protections exist for a reason. If you have a warrant, I'll comply immediately. But without one, I can't help you. Webb's expression hardened. He said, his voice dropping lower, I've been doing this job for 18 years. And in those 18 years, I've learned something about people like you. People like you. Those 3 words hung in the air like smoke. You come into neighborhoods like this, Webb continued, open up your little businesses, and suddenly you're experts on everything. Suddenly, you know better than the people who've been protecting these communities for decades. Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear. Something else. Something that felt like clarity. People like me, she repeated quietly. What does that mean, detective? You know exactly what it means, Webb shot back. I see it everywhere now. People who think their degrees make them special. People who think they can lecture cops about how to do their jobs. Meanwhile, we're the ones out here dealing with real crime, real problems. Mrs. Kim's voice came from near the vitamins. Small but firm. Officer, she's just doing her job. She's a good pharmacist. My daughter comes here too. Webb spun toward her. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay out of this. Actually, Maya said, drawing his attention back, Mrs. Kim is right. I am doing my job, and my job includes protecting my patient's privacy, just like your job includes respecting constitutional rights. Webb's hand moved to his radio, a gesture, a promise of escalation. You want to do this the hard way, he asked, because I can make this very hard for you. I can have this place inspected top to bottom. I can make sure every single medication in here is accounted for. You know how many violations we usually find in places like this when we actually look? Places like this. Maya's hands were steady on the counter. Her mind was racing, but her body was calm. Years of balancing chemicals and counting pills had taught her precision under pressure. Code compliance falls under the State Board of Pharmacy, she said. We were inspected 7 weeks ago. We're in full compliance. If you have specific concerns about pharmacy operations, you can file a complaint with the appropriate regulatory body. But you don't have the authority to conduct that kind of inspection without proper authorization. The silence that followed felt like pressure building in a sealed container. Webb stared at her, really stared, like he was trying to figure out how this had gotten away from him, how this routine shakedown had turned into something else. Let me be very clear, Maya said, and now there was steel in her voice beneath the professional tone. You came into my pharmacy without a warrant. You demanded protected health information. When I explained the legal requirements, you threatened me with criminal charges. When that didn't work, you implied you could inspect my facility under a different jurisdiction. All of this is being recorded on our security system. There are witnesses present. If you continue this course of action, I will file a formal complaint with your department, and I will pursue every legal remedy available to me. The air felt electric. Webb's face had gone red. His jaw was working like he was chewing words he couldn't quite spit out. I'll be back, he finally said, with proper paperwork. I look forward to seeing it, Maya replied. And, detective, when you do come back, please call ahead. We serve a lot of patients here. I'd like to minimize disruption to their care. Webb turned and walked out. The door chimed behind him. Cheerful. Oblivious. Mrs. Kim walked to the counter, her eyes wide. That was, Maya, are you okay? Maya realized her hands were shaking now, just slightly. The adrenaline catching up to her body now that the moment had passed. I'm okay, she said. And she was, shaky but okay. I couldn't let him do that. I couldn't let him violate my patient's trust. James, her pharmacy tech, was staring at her like she'd just walked on water. Dr. Chen, he said, I've never seen anyone stand up to a cop like that. I wasn't standing up to him. Maya said, quietly, I was standing up for the law. There's a difference. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't over. The next hour passed in a blur of phone calls. First to her attorney, David, who specialized in healthcare law. Then to the State Board. Then back to David after he'd watched the security footage. Maya, David's voice was tight on the phone. This is textbook civil rights violation. You handled it perfectly. But you need to understand this detective is going to be angry. And angry cops sometimes come back with friends. What do I do? Maya asked. We file a formal complaint. Immediately. We document everything while it's fresh. And we prepare for the possibility of retaliation. That night, Maya sat in her apartment, looking out over the city lights of Seattle. The same city she'd grown up in. The same neighborhoods she'd played in as a kid. The same streets where her parents had run their small restaurant for 30 years before retiring. She thought about her patients. Mr. Rodriguez, picking up his HIV medication every month, always looking around nervously like someone might see him. Jasmine, the young woman transitioning, who'd told Maya once with tears in her eyes that this was the only pharmacy where she felt safe. David, the veteran managing his PTSD with medication, who'd said he trusted Maya because she never judged. These were real people, with real lives, real fears, real needs, and if she'd given Webb what he wanted without a warrant, without proper legal authority, she would have betrayed every single one of them. The complaint she and David filed was 12 pages long, every violation documented, every timestamp noted, every word from the security footage transcribed. It landed on Captain Lisa Morales' desk 3 days later. Captain Morales was known for two things: a sharp mind and a zero-tolerance policy for constitutional violations. She'd worked her way up through the ranks in a department that hadn't always made it easy for women, especially women of color. She'd seen bad policing up close, and she hated it. She watched the security footage once, then again, then a third time. Then she called Detective Webb into her office. "Tell me about your visit to Chen's pharmacy on Tuesday," she said. Webb tried to spin it. A difficult pharmacy owner. An obstructed investigation. Someone who didn't understand how policing worked. Morales let him talk. Then she turned her monitor toward him. "Watch this," she said, "and then tell me again what happened." The footage played. Every word, every threat, every implication. When it ended, Morales asked one question. "Did you have a warrant or any legal authorization for what you requested?" Webb hesitated. "No, but..." "Did you threaten her with criminal charges for following federal law?" Longer hesitation. "I was trying to..." "You're suspended," Morales said. "Effective immediately. Hand over your badge and weapon." The investigation that followed uncovered a pattern. 3 other instances in the past 6 months where Webb had requested information without proper authorization. 3 other times when people had complied because they didn't know they could say no, because they didn't know the law like Maya did, because they didn't have the confidence to assert their rights, because they were scared. The report recommended termination. The department agreed. But Maya's fight didn't end there. With David's help, she filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. Not for revenge, not even really for the money, but because there needed to be consequences, because the system needed to change, because other healthcare providers needed to know they could stand firm. The city settled, 6 figures, confidential terms, but more importantly, mandatory training for all officers on healthcare privacy laws. New oversight procedures. Written policies requiring supervisors to approve all requests for protected information. Systemic change. Real change. 6 months after that October afternoon, Maya was invited to speak at a national pharmacy conference. She stood on a stage in front of 300 pharmacists from across the country and told her story. Not as a hero, not as someone special, just as someone who knew the law and refused to be intimidated into ignoring it. After her talk, a young pharmacist approached her. Pakistani woman, maybe late 20s with anxious eyes. "Dr. Chun," she said, "last month a police officer came to my pharmacy and asked for patient records. I gave them to him. I didn't know I could say no. I've been sick about it ever since." Maya took her hand. "You didn't know," she said gently. "That's not your fault. But now you do know. And next time, you'll know what to do." "What if I'd said no and he'd arrested me?" the young woman asked. Then you would have been arrested for following federal law, Maya said, and you would have had grounds for a lawsuit, and the officer would have faced consequences. Your rights only protect you if you're willing to assert them, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. A year after the incident, Maya's pharmacy was thriving. Word had spread through the community about what had happened, about the pharmacist who'd stood up to a detective, about the place where your privacy was actually protected. New patients came specifically because they knew their information was safe. People who'd been afraid to fill prescriptions for stigmatized conditions. People who'd been burned before by providers who didn't take privacy seriously. They came to Maya's pharmacy, and they felt safe. One afternoon, a teenager came in, nervous, fidgeting with the straps of her backpack. "Are you Dr. Chen?" she asked. "I am," Maya said with a smile. "How can I help you?" I need to fill a prescription for birth control, but I don't want my parents to know. Will you tell them?" Maya recognized the fear in the girl's eyes, the same fear that lived in so many of her patients. The fear that their private medical decisions would become public knowledge, would be used against them, would change how people saw them. "Your medical information is private," Maya said gently. "I won't tell your parents or anyone else without your permission. That's the law. And even if it wasn't the law, it would still be the right thing to do." The relief that flooded the girl's face was profound. "Thank you," she whispered. That's what it was all about. Maya thought, as she processed the prescription, not the lawsuit, not the settlement, not even the policy changes, as important as they were. It was about this moment, this teenager feeling safe enough to get health care she needed. That night, Maya locked up the pharmacy and stood for a moment on the sidewalk outside. The neon sign, Chen's Pharmacy, glowed against the darkening sky. The same neighborhood she'd always known. The same streets. The same city. But something had changed. Or maybe nothing had changed except that one person had decided to draw a line. Here's what you can violate, and here's what you can't. Here's what I'll give you, and here's what I'll protect. Here's where your authority ends, and here's where my responsibility begins. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply know the law and follow it. Know your rights and assert them. Know what matters and refuse to compromise on it. Maya thought about Detective Webb sometimes, wondered what he was doing now, if he'd learned anything, if he understood why what he'd done was wrong. But mostly she thought about her patients, about Mr. Rodriguez, who no longer looked around nervously when he picked up his medication. About Jasmine, who'd told her last week that she'd recommended the pharmacy to 3 other trans women in her support group. About David the veteran, who'd brought her homemade cookies and told her she was one of the good ones. About the teenage girl who'd needed birth control and found safety instead of judgment. Those were the victories that mattered. The small moments. The daily acts of integrity. The consistent choice to do the right thing, even when the wrong thing would have been easier. Maya walked to her car, keys jingling in her hand. Tomorrow there would be more prescriptions to fill, more patients to serve, more phone calls with insurance companies and more prior authorization forms and more of the endless small tasks that made up her days. And maybe another officer would walk through that door with demands that exceeded their authority. And if they did, Maya knew exactly what she would say, because some lines exist for a reason, and some rights are too important to surrender just because someone with a badge asks you to. The pharmacy lights went dark behind her. The security cameras kept recording. The neighborhood settled into evening quiet, and Maya Chen drove home, knowing that tomorrow she'd be back, doing the same work, serving the same community, protecting the same rights. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. And sometimes that's the only reason you need. If this story touched you in any way, don't keep it to yourself. Like it, share it with someone, and subscribe for more stories that speak to the soul. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.